Awesome. Well, hello everyone. My name is Dan Harton and I lead the customer marketing team here at HireEasy. I want to welcome you to everyone to this webinar. The title is Diversity Dead? It's powered by HireEasy and the Outbound Recruiting Academy and community. And I want this session to be engaging. So please use the chat to network, throw your LinkedIn profile in the chat and connect with everybody on this webinar, especially our guests. Our guest speakers are a wealth of knowledge, and it's really good to follow them and connect with them and network with them, especially on this topic. I also want this to be real and I want this to be honest. So please throw any thoughtful questions around this topic as we get going. If there's something that really piques your interest, jog something in your memory, please throw it out there because we really want this to be really, really engaging. As someone deeply committed to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, I believe it's crucial to continuously examine and challenge our approaches to ensure meaningful progress gets completed. I'm not the expert on this, so what I wanted to do is bring two experts that are in the field. Keirsten Greggs, the founder and CEO of Trap Recruiter LLC, and Kevin Walters. He is a cultural strategist and DEI pioneer with an impressive 20-year track record at Fortune 500 giants like Amazon, Microsoft, Home Depot. He also is the founder of Top DEI Consulting Co. And he has a really, really good take on this whole topic. So together, Keirsten and Kevin bring so much knowledge and insights to this conversation. So that's why I wanted to have the conversation with them. So like I said, please be engaging. Please ask questions within the chat as we answer the question, is diversity dead in talent acquisition? So without further ado, just want to ask to give a little intro, Kevin, Keirsten, and get us up to speed of kind of what you've been doing within this space.
He said Kevin's name first, but he's definitely a gentleman, so I think he's going to let me go. Hi, everyone. I'm Keirsten Greggs, the founder and principal talent acquisition consultant at Trap Recruiter. It is an acronym that means trusted, relationship builder, accountable, and proactive. And my focus is on bridging the gap between job seekers from marginalized communities to the organizations who are looking to hire them.
Awesome. Well, my name is Kevin Walters, and I have I don't want to date myself, like Dan said, definitely 15 plus years of talent acquisition management, working across multiple industries, and really tell people I was doing diversity and inclusion, DEI. I was born into it, right? Into multiculturalism. And for the last couple of years, I not only headed up the head of strategy and diversity and inclusion for a SaaS-based technical company. At late last year, I started my own company and called Top DI Consulting, where now under the brand Diversity Chef, I help organizations build culture. And how do I do that? Through using food and symbolism to help people understand that food is a natural connector for us, and helping the audience, like yourself, understand that we can still have an inclusive organization and culture by connecting through things that we love to do, which is eat. So there's more to come on that, but I'm happy and excited about being here today with both Keirsten and Dan.
Love it. Well, as we get started, let's just dive in on the title. Do you think diversity is dead in talent acquisition? And what is the landscape of that topic within organizations?
I'll go first, and you can go first on the next one.
All right, for
sure. That's an interesting question, and it's one that I've been pondering for quite some time. I think I mentioned to you that I did a series on my podcast with a similar topic, is DEI dead? And I took it from different perspectives, not just the talent acquisition perspective, but from an EEO perspective, meaning someone who was a civil rights attorney, was on folks that were more in IT or training, someone that came from a different community. A lot of times when we think about diversity inclusion, we're only focused on the visible characteristics, the things that we can see. So, getting someone who was neurodivergent to come and talk about their experiences and all of the pathways that we're trying to make in that area has been a topic. And I think what we miss a lot of the times is we try to get caught up on these trends and we just don't really dive deep. We do a lot, we'll do the surface work. We'll put up remember in 2020, the black boxes on our profiles. We'll change our colors during Pride Month to the rainbow flag. We'll have a speaker come during Black History Month, Women's History Month, LGBTQIA month, like whatever the case may be. Like we'll focus on these events and these pinpoint these times, but we don't do a great deal of the follow-up work. And now that DEI has been under constant attack since it was been highlighted, more so starting in 2020, since there's been so much focus on it and there's so much pushback from it, I don't think it's dead. I would say it was never really truly alive. It's been on life support for the entire time. Like it's never been a mainstay. It's never been top of strategy or top of priorities. We have some organizations who are more committed than others, but overall, like I said, it's not dead, but it wasn't ever truly alive is probably a better question.
Yeah, this is great answer. This is a mouthful. Let's start by maybe just talking about why it feels like diversity is dead, right? And what's happened, right? And no secret, after the George Floyd, I say movement, which is now seems like more of a moment, within time, we saw all this kind of diversement from DEI initiatives, not only 2-3 years afterwards, right? We saw like this rollback and backlash of programs. And it kind of started with the SCOTUS ruling, right? Affirmative action. I sensed that was going to happen, right after that ruling from the public sector. I felt like, because of all the attack on affirmative action and saying that, it's no longer necessary to use, racial backgrounds for consideration to universities and colleges. But really, if you think about it, this kind of started back when Trump was president, 2020. Do you remember he actually came out the legislation saying that no more diversity training, no more, he actually created that, I think, marker that led the way. Probably 3-4 years later, he created that diversity training ban. And what we've seen since then is, we could talk about Florida alone, Governor Ron DeSantis and all of his legislation against university and colleges. We could talk about all the layoffs, almost 50% dump of DEI experts across tech companies and Meta, Tesla, you name it. We could talk about grant programs. So with all the politicization, the shift in the landscape, all the noise, and I always say that the noisiest folks always makes it feel more impactful, makes it feel like it's overwhelming, like this is what's really the focus of everyone's mind. I think DEI is not necessarily dead, but what's happening is it's really being transformed. It's evolving. What we're seeing is more accountability. Yes, we faced a lot of challenges, but I think there was a lot of, let's just be honest, there was a lot of box checking, activities that were occurring, just focused on linear activities like hiring talent, not really focused on inclusion and belonging, really making sure that we're taking care of and nurturing our employees. And I think what you're seeing now is, I wouldn't say it's dead, but we're seeing more accountability. Organizations are saying, hey, this is not really a priority. We didn't see, I like to make this joke. It's not like a baptism. When you get baptized, you come out and all of a sudden you're saved and like, hey, you know what, I'm never going to sin again. It didn't happen. And I think companies had this misrepresentation and feeling like, hey, this was going to cure everything. We were going to have a perfect organization. We were going to have parity. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. At the end of the day, There's more transformation that needs to be done. And guess what? It's not going anywhere because the workforce has changed. Gen Z and
How
millennials, and we'll talk about it. I won't get ahead, but that's my
how
quick summary on that.
how does companies define diversity, equity, and inclusion with the context of organizational culture? What's the right way to do it? And do you see it differently from large organizations, small organizations, and putting it a priority? And how has that evolution throughout the years gone?
So I see it becoming a priority eventually, because at the core of it, companies need to, let's just be honest, if you want to sell to a broader consumer base, a more diverse population, how can you be homogenous? It just doesn't make business sense. And I won't get into the whole McKinsey study since 2014 and 19 saying that more women in executive positions, those companies have been more profitable, more gender and diverse organizations have been more profitable. The stats are out there, easy to find. What I'll say is, in order to make this work, companies really have to say, you know what, this is important. We're going to put a stake in the ground. We're going to make not only the leaders, the diversity agents, ambassadors like myself, Keirsten, myself, and other people who are really in this field to empower inclusion, but make sure other leaders within the organizations are accountable, making sure that everyone at the table has some sort of, like I say, seat, not in the seat, but stake in the game, right? As far as whether it be goal oriented, and as far as penalties, if we don't meet the goals in within sales, what happens to the sales org? So I don't think it's I think it has to evolve and transform itself into more of a true business objective, and ensuring that everyone across the organization is focused on it and working together and creating a unified strategy and approach.
I wanted
Kirsten,
to
yeah, go ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say I wanted to touch on one part of the question, and you asked, are larger organizations or smaller organizations better at it? And in my experience, having worked as an employee in the global organizations, I will say that the smaller organizations to which I consult actually do a better job. And that's not a slight, it's because they are closer to the problem. They are closer to the issues. If one person has a discrimination case against the organization or a manager, and then that person has 4 members on the team, and you've got 2 to 3 members who have experienced the same things, like that's a huge problem. Whereas in a much larger organization where you've got a manager that has, say, 25 people reporting to them and 2 people have an issue, they're like, okay, well, we're just going to get rid of the 2 people and keep the 23 and move it along. So I definitely think that depending on what the goal and what the outcome is and what risk the organization attaches to having problems, you've got large organizations, like I said, they'll make a payout before they will solve the problem. They'll just pay you to go away, or they'll pay you to be quiet, or they'll pay you to move to a new position. Until they're ready to move you, until they're ready for you to move you along, or they're ready for you to move yourself along. So I definitely wanted to touch on that, because I think that's one of the things that we miss. We try to have this DEI, B, C, J, whatever additional letters we're putting at the end, one size fits all approach, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't even work that way in the same industry. It doesn't work that way in the same size company. There are so many variables and so many factors that weigh into how effective your strategy is going to be. So
You guys talked on like checking the box, and companies are doing that. How can companies ensure that their D&I initiatives are not just performative gestures, but genuinely contribute to the change?
accept feedback. A lot of folks are not interested in feedback. A lot of organizations are not interested in being disruptive. They're not interested in being uncomfortable. They don't want to hear those things. They don't want to be challenged. They want to believe that because I am doing something, that is enough, and you should accept this, and this is going to get us to whatever the goal is. So until folks take their hands off it and realize that they're not necessarily the experts on it, I always advocate for outside assistance or consultation in any size organization, because it just does not work for what do they say, the call coming from inside the house. Like how are you, the problem, going to really be fair in examining, correcting, and mitigating the problem, when again it's in your best interest to let things remain the way they are. Ooh.
Yeah.
We got a
Very
lot of good
cool.
questions too. So I'm gonna let you, but there's a lot of good
Yep.
questions.
Well,
Sure.
one of the questions goes off of that. You said leverage experts. Clifton James says, as DEI experts, it's a time to make a compelling business case to stakeholders and leadership, driving not only financial success, but also fostering an inclusive corporate culture. From you guys, in your experience being the experts in the field, what is a strong business case that individuals can take to their stakeholders and leadership of implementing some of these initiatives, some of these inclusion programs, and implement more of a focus on this space?
Yeah. Dan, when I was, like I said, head of diversity and inclusion solutions for a tech company, one of the first things I did, and like Keirsten was just saying about the size of the company, it's not a one size fits all approach. And so one of the first things I did, I actually went through a merger with that company that was like a smaller startup to a mid-sized company, close to 200 plus people. And so I saw a transformation from just being a small organization to almost being a mid-sized organization. And one of the things I would suggest is you have to understand what you have and what you're trying to accomplish. And I had been the head of DI for a company that never had a leader in this role. So they didn't really know what to expect outside of what they saw other companies do, right? And so my goal was to come in and first assess by using data, because I knew, I'll just be honest, the company was 75% gender, not male, but 75% white, but gender was pretty high up there as well. And we had a pretty high population of baby boomers. And so one of the first things I looked at was, let me just see our workforce data, what it looks like, what we have. And then I went ahead and created a specific inclusion survey, which is what I use in my consulting practice today, to allow companies to just quickly assess. Now you have to have the trust of your employees, because people are not going to just want to answer, hey, what do you identify as? Are you neurodiverse or transgender? Won't answer those questions unless you give me a valid reason and I feel like I'm in a safe space. So the first thing I did is kind of educate our population on why I was doing this and saying, hey, with this information, we want to build custom programs and initiatives that accommodate employee groups within our company. And so having that data and working backwards from that to create the initiatives. And from there, we started looking at putting together ERG groups and started looking at, heck, one of the things we did was Martin Luther King. That wasn't on the books. We put that as a holiday on our books. So there were some important transformational things we were able to accomplish really quick by understanding what we have. And then I'll say this and pass the mic. Also, level setting and understanding what the knowledge base of your employee population is. Again, it's not a custom one size fits all. So I couldn't go in there and say, hey, you know what you guys need on bias training and anti-racism training and everything. I mean, they weren't going to be prepared for it. And a lot of our population was in Serbia. So it was really starting from the basics and talking about identity and diversity and helping people understand some of the terminology and building on those blocks.
Again, you touched on all the great points. Data, or what I like to call facts over feelings, are always going to going to prove. I mean, we know our organizational leaders, they want to see they want to see the numbers. They want to know the story through how is this going to positively impact my organization. Like Kevin said, ERGs, because you have to have a safe space for folks who do feel who are marginalized, who are underrepresented, to have a place to come together. And unfortunately, for, again, small organizations, that's not always possible. But there are external organizations who will foster those types of communities for your staff when that's just not possible. Like if you have a 5-person company, like you're not going to have an ERG for what?
True.
Like that doesn't work. But again, there is a community outside of your organization to do those things. So I mean, those are the only things. And then I guess the last thing, because like I said, I've been through multiple iterations of this. For whatever reason, we always make it feel like work when it's DEI. We always make it feel like a chore. Like this is mandatory DEI training. Do you want to be told to go to some meeting and watch some video and fill out some form? Mandatory? I mean, like, how many of us enjoy doing our semi-annual or however often we have to do it, refresher trainings for compliance, for just to get your IT password, to be able to do whatever it is that you do in your job, that's outside of that. Like people are going to always, like, you're going to have pushback from that. So we don't even present it in a way that talks about advancing, innovating. Like we don't talk about it that way. That stuff might be in the training, that stuff might be in the literature, that stuff might be the intention, might be the impact, but our intention doesn't come off that way. We, like I said, it always feels like I don't want to do this, I don't feel like doing this. And how many times are we going to try that same stuff over and over and over and over again before we realize, like, this doesn't work. Like, this doesn't work.
We got a question in the chat. It says, our recruiters do a great job of presenting a diverse talent pool, but the hiring managers don't have any goals for DE&I. This seems to work against our HR initiatives and goals in building a more inclusive company. How can we approach this better so we can make some progress?
Well, the HR department sounds like it's doing the right thing. So it has to come from the top down. Like your leadership team has to be bought in, and they have to make it a goal for the hiring team, for the hiring managers. They have to make it a goal for the line managers that says, these are our benchmarks. This is how we do business here, and then hold them accountable when they don't reach them, or provide them with assistance to get there.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I did when I was at Amazon, when I was in a lead recruiting role, this was like 2016, 17, we really were just starting to talk about diversity, and there were no mandatory goals yet. And one of the things that I realized was, instead of making it a business case for the organization, because there was so much perspective on what should the goal be. Should it be 2 hires a month, 3 hires? I remember those conversations, very stressful for recruiters. And recruiters, if you're out there, put your hand up if this has happened to you, because I do remember like organizations trying to figure this out, right? An emoji or something, and say, hey, what's our goal going to be? And I remember just taking a step back, and back then I was working with like a sales engineering organization. And I was like, okay, what if I just figure out what's in the market again? And I use the data from that and create my own somewhat metrics. And then I prove that business case to my manager and say, hey, in our market, I think I could get, for every 5 interviews, I could probably get you 1 hire because of the demographics in Seattle and the type of engineers that we have that work in that workforce, and then create the goal. Now, not every organization is going to be that nimble and able to do that, but in bringing that data to your organization, because we make assumptions, they have it, they just don't know. If they don't have a talent intelligence team, they may not even know what the market bears. But if you, as an advisor, or as a recruiter, sourcer, leader, whatever, can bring that information to your team and say, hey, you know what, this is what the goals should be, and start there, that could be a way of saying, you know what, this is a very measurable and attainable goal for us based on where we operate.
So one of the individuals asked, what would be a SMART goal example that you would give to leadership from kind of a base?
Would be an example. Again, when you're smart, measurable, attainable, result driven, right? You have to look at that organization and customize it based on. I don't know that there's one goal. If you're at a large company like Amazon, where your footprint is in multiple
Everywhere.
cities, and you have an office in Atlanta, you have an office in Seattle, you can have more aggressive goals if you're able to hire in either of those two cities. Now, if you're just focused on hiring underrepresented talent in one particular space, whether it be Seattle and your talent availability in that, I've actually heard companies say, yeah, we want to hire, 100 people. And you're like, we're in San Jose. Okay. And the talent availability is like 2% as far as underrepresented engineers in that market. Not going to happen. Like from the start, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I wish I could give you a straight answer on what that one goal is, but you have to look at your organization and see where you operate and see all of the parameters to set your goals.
Here's another
Holly-
question.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I was
you're
saying-
good.
I think it was Holly that made a great point. And now I can't find it because the chat keeps changing, but someone was talking about the goal just can't be hiring. You have to think about retention as well. So I did want to point that out because I do think more TA professionals are speaking not only on attraction and selection, but
Right.
100% focused on how to retain those people we work so hard to attract and select.
Another question, it says, for me, it's unfortunate that far too many people combine DEI and race relations. What can we do in talent acquisition to do both? Highlight the differences between the two while drawing important connections between them.
Keirsten, you want to go? You want me to start? I guess
I don't have an unbiased answer to that question because I am racially identified. Like I come from a community that is racialized. So that's going to be tough for me. I don't, because of who I am, I don't see the utility in separating the two because my person can't separate the two. There has to be a connection. Like what I bring to the table, like what other races bring to the table has to somehow, like we have to be able to commingle those things and not shy away from having that conversation. And unfortunately, that's been my experience when it came to diversity training and things, even, from an ERG perspective, anytime we did try to do something that would be race-based, a lot of organizations have, Black employee or whatever they want to call them, African-American employee resource groups. They might have Latin American or Hispanic employee resource group, Native American resource groups, but they look at those communities more so from a cultural perspective, and as opposed to Black people where they only see them as racialized. And then again, we have to be aware that, you have people who are racialized or not racialized who also fall into those ethnic categories of Latin, of Asian, of Caribbean, whatever the case may be. So it's hard for me to say that would be a goal that I would want to advise an organization on, because like I said, that would diminish and erase me as a person.
Yeah. And Dan, if I could just add to that, that's great, because I think outside of your own individual race, let's just call it what it is, right? You can't be an expert on the Black and African American experience, and I can't be an expert on the white experience. And I think what we're challenged with understanding is that it can't be separate because all experiences are just not the same. You can have me and Dan working in the same office, same cubicle, and both, it's like one of us is feeling heat, the other person is feeling cold. Like the temperature is different. And people don't really understand that because they're in the heat. The sun is shining on their side. It's not that cold over there. And I'm using the metaphor just to say that because, when you're saying race relations, can they be separate? Just think on the way to work, someone could be having a very holistic, challenging experience, traumatic experience where they were pulled over by a police officer or something happened in their community or neighborhood, or they watched something on TV that happened to someone that looked like them that really traumatized them. And now they're expected to like, okay, let's put that in a box. And now I'm going to ask you to come to work and just focus on your job. We're emotional beings. It's not possible. And I think that's where the empathy and understanding has to come in. I don't have to be transgender to understand that there's a struggle with being transgender. And I think we all need to, it's hard to walk in someone else's shoes, but we all need to understand that you can't make a judgment on what's happening to someone else because unless you're experiencing what they are. So empathy is important to understand in creating policies and procedures.
Another question, D&I and ESG collectively appear to hurt each other. Why do you think that is?
Was that Steve's question?
Yep.
I didn't get the question. What was it? They hurts each other?
It says DEI and ESG collectively appear to hurt each other. Why is that?
I would need to see a study that says that they do. So, Steve, where is that question coming from?
Maybe you can throw that in the chat.
Yeah, he'll throw it in the chat. He's pretty active. He says, okay.
Maybe we'll go back to it. There's a lot of questions on, recruiting and sourcing, a diverse talent. But what are some of the common pitfalls or challenges that companies encounter when attempting to implement diversity and inclusion programs, or it's a 180 switch or flip into trying to create an inclusive sourcing strategy?
I think the biggest challenge is just focusing on it's a one size fits all approach again. Like everybody's community has a different way of engaging, communicating. If you're talking to the indigenous community, heck, they don't like to be called Native American. Did you know that? I mean, there's little things that, different communities may not adhere to. That you have to try to understand, which is why it's great if you have an ERG to lean on your subject matter experts or find someone who can help you understand, like, how do you message or relate to that community so you can have some common ground or at least have an opportunity to create an effective connection. That's one I love. Keirsten throws them out there.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to ask me the question again because I was going back and forth reading the comments, trying to catch up on what we missed. I'm sorry.
No, what are some common pitfalls or challenges that
Oh.
companies encounter when attempting to implement something, and they have this 180 switch, and how to recruit individuals of diverse and background?
I think for a lot, it's only focusing on one aspect of DEI and not looking at it as an interconnected thing. So we'll focus only on diversity. So getting our numbers up. We want to interview more people. Yeah, but then what? Yeah, you interviewed them. Now what? Guess what? You're still not hiring anyone. Hey. But our goal was to interview them, not to hire them. So, we have these kinds of things. Not having clear objectives that, again, are going to be impactful and that are going to be effective and that are going to be repeatable. Like and one of the things that has always concerned me, and I've been in TA for, 24 years. And of all of the things that we measure, our DEI initiatives are the ones that we measure the least. And I don't just mean like the number of them, I mean like the amount of time. Like we will have workforce plans, we will have, whole strategies over years, laid out, chunks of months, chunks of, or the quarters, the years, by this time, by this time, by this time. And then we don't really do that for DEI. And once we do hit one of those roadblocks, once we do, you know, kind of fall into one of those pits, we give up and we say, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to try something different, or we're going to put this on the back burner until next time, because now we really need to do X, Y, and Z. So it's just like we don't stick with it long enough for it to truly come about. And again, I'm speaking from a general perspective, not necessarily calling out one particular organization.
It looks like Steve threw that question in the chat. It says, better question, both DEI and ESG address similar areas. Being better people towards and with each other. Why so much hate towards this overarching goal?
Again, I just think it makes people feel uncomfortable, and people don't like to feel uncomfortable. We have to remember that we have a workforce age-wise that has never been more diverse than it's been. You've got, in some instances, boomers and Gen Z working in the same organization. Guess how many layers are between that? We all are coming from, regardless of the other factors, like age alone is causing a big, huge thing. And you've got a bunch of people like, I don't engage work the same way that my parents do. Yes, I took their advice. They're boomers. I took their advice, and I do that. And there's things that I used to, to the T, like these were their instructions, but that doesn't necessarily work today. That didn't necessarily work that day, but it was all they could do, And then I look ahead to, to even some millennials who are the generation after me, who are faring much better, who are doing a much better job of speaking up for themselves. And we're not even going to talk about Gen Z. Like and I'm not saying this in a bad way, like they engage work in a way that is extremely admirable. Like you are not going to catch one of them. Like you get on their nerves one day. I'm not saying they're going to be flippant and just leave and never come back, but they will advocate for themselves. They will speak up for themselves. And they feel empowered in a way that Gen X, like myself, like we didn't. And when we did, it was like a big deal. Like, oh, you think you're the other stuff, the sugar honey iced tea, because you spoke up for yourself. So, I think some of that is it. Some of that does come into perspective when it comes to your culture, your environment. Like there's a great and our workforces are more spread out too. You got folks like we're on Zoom right now. Each of us are in different parts of the country, literally. Like we're hundreds of, and for Kevin, thousands of miles apart. Like that's a big deal. And we didn't used to do that. So all of that comes into play too. Unfortunately, I think that we highlight the financial aspect of diversity, equity, inclusion, plus all the other letters you want to put on the end for a reason, because that feels tangible, and it's so much easier for me to say this made us this much more money than my employees are healthier. They have a better feeling about themselves, about the organization. Like that becomes a little bit more difficult to measure, or the organization doesn't want to do the work necessary to measure it, because again, they're focused 100% on meeting their shareholders, their stakeholders' demands for what is the bottom line. And unfortunately, a lot of times, the emotional impact, the mental impact, the cultural impact does not mean as much as it should. Hopefully that answered your question, Steve.
Yeah, and I would just add to that sugar honey iced tea answer that I love that. Um, you know, Kirsten hit a lot of points. When you talk about the objectives, ESG, think about this. Environmental and social government, those are very holistic, right, type goals that benefit everybody. A company is an LLC or a corporation is more like an individual. So just the nature of the terms itself, you're asking why they contradict? Yeah, because one is more about the good of the whole versus the individual of the company become more financially rich, profitable, and such. So why are they more focused on that? It makes sense. You know, corporations are more focused on like how are we going to hit our, financial goals and make money. Whereas today's generation, like Kirsten said, we have four different layers here. We got baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials that are trying to cooperate in the same environment with different idealisms and goals and values. And some of those contradict. Like baby boomers, they're all about financial stability. Gen Z, hey, we're out of here. Give me mine now. I'll buy my car. I'll take my risk. Hey, look what happened to my parents. They saved their money for 30 years or they worked for 30 years and then they got laid off. How is that a great example for them? So some of this is our fault. Oh, by the way, we gave them the internet so everybody feels like they're super smart by just pressing a computer keyboard. So, I mean, let's just call it what it is. We have different values and cultural norms today, which is why there's such a culture clash. And it's all going to blow up soon. I'm just kidding. But
You hit on technology and how that's advancing rapidly. How can technology, data analytics be leveraged to support some of these efforts? And on the flip side, where do you think it could actually damper some of these initiatives, particularly in recruitment, talent management, and this space?
I think it might have been during our initial meetings. I think we talked about this a little bit about how we train technology. You know, we all talk about AI, especially in recruiting and sourcing, but we're giving the information, we're teaching it to look for certain things. And when you don't have a diverse workforce that's giving the opportunity for it, like you're going to have the same output every single time. If you're asking the same questions, you're going to get the same answers. If your question is biased, you're going to get a biased response. So that's definitely one of the fallbacks. The benefits, technology makes a lot more things accessible. It brings us closer together. And I'm saying this not from necessarily like, oh, we're closer together because we're on Zoom in proximity, but I mean like never before would we be able to, like, we would be able to get all these people in a room, but we'd be somewhere co-located that would be, for perhaps a not, cost prohibitive or just not an opportunity for anyone else to get there, and we would only be able to be talking in a very small ecosystem. So technology gives us broader reach, but at the same time, we have to have broader responsibility with what we do with that reach as well. And I think we sometimes forget about that. DEI and AI. Okay.
And I'll add to that, and I'll include AI, Steve. When you think about technology, how it can hurt, there are great benefits and advantages, but just think about just let's fall back to the pandemic or the digital divide. There were underserved communities that could not educate their children and operate because they infrastructure wise did not have, technology enabled in their neighborhood or able to, or even have a computer, right? So now when you look at how it can actually hurt, if we don't have a government or we don't have public corporations making technology available to everyone, so we're all advancing simultaneously, you're always going to have groups of people that are left behind, right? Especially when you look at AI, you think about Chat GPT coming out. Well, great, Google came out with a free version, right, that competed with that, right? Genie, Gemini, and Bard. And when you look at that, what if you couldn't afford Chat GPT Premium, right? If you couldn't afford the fees, there's a divide right there. So not all things, again, are equal for everyone. And I think sometimes, depending on your position, you always have to think about who are the folks that are not in this room, but also not able to capitalize on the advancements of technology and what's occurring today. Because those are the folks that are usually hurt, and they actually don't have a voice, because they may not even know. If you think about it, they might even know the legislation is against them.
That's a
One of the
great
questions it
point.
says,
Sorry.
yeah, do you think AI in recruiting and hiring will harm or help DEI over the course of the next 5 to 10 years?
Both. I'm going to say both, and I'll say, because as of right now, it's not regulated. I don't see the government. I don't see a body of, and I just see companies coming out and saying, hey, we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to develop this technology. Hey, do you remember that not too long ago we actually had, I won't mention the name of the company, a company come out with facial recognition, an AI product that hurt one particular demographic group that had to actually have that product solution pulled off the market, and it was very premature. Luckily it was caught. But what if that similar type instance goes through, maybe in medical, maybe in some other field that we're not aware of right now? We don't even know, with all the advancements, what's happening, who can be hurt by it. And I think we're moving at such a fast pace. I mean, I watch MSNBC every day, pretty much stay on the street, and it's just like every time I look around, another company pops up or being funded. So we really need to be thoughtful about that.
How can organizations effectively address the glass ceiling for underrepresented groups, particularly in leadership positions, and foster pathways for advancement?
If we knew the answer to that question, it probably wouldn't exist. Like, that great question, and thank you for making me look dumb.
How much time do we have?
We have about
Yeah.
yeah. You know what? Let's table this. No. So again,
Waterboarding.
waterboarding. So see
That has to be Steve.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, Mr. Levy. Absolutely not. So again, what we can do is be intentional about how we are engaging these communities. So you have a glass ceiling, great. But I mean, you have a glass ceiling, that's not great. You have an interview slate. You say, I want a diverse interview slate. You interview those folks, but your intention was always to hire the person who fits to your homogenous community anyway. So don't do that. And I say this from experience, because I've had that experience and I totally crashed out when they put me through that. Because we're talking about trying to get on the CEO's calendar, the leadership team's calendar, for someone that was going to have access to them and be in the C-suite. And I talked to them about, okay, let's talk about the cost of this hire, the cost of these interviews, your time, meaning the vice president of the organization, $300-400 an hour, and you spent an hour with 4 candidates, 3 of which you never had any intention to hire. What was the point of that? And we did this, like I said, with multiple leadership team members. So again, I always provide data, and I always show them where they're losing money, having positions open. I always show them the cost benefit of getting beyond, again, your little ecosystem, waiting for Mary Smith to decide that she wants to leave Google, and perhaps let's let's get Mary over to our company, Trap Recruiter. Yeah, well, why are we trying to poach this person when you've got Keirsten Greggs sitting in your organization right now?
Facts.
So
Facts.
we especially at the C-suite, whenever it comes time to, who's going to be next, we always look out. We tend to look outside our organization first instead of right there. And the cost to hire, the cost to promote, the cost to retain that person is a lot less than you spent taking Mary to lunch, to dinner, flying Mary to the interview, and the time that you spent trying to convince Mary to do the thing that you wanted Mary to do.
Dan,
Go ahead. I
was just going to say two things on that, because being someone that's been in that role too, and seeing how it kind of operates from that window. A lot of these roles, they're not really directly interviewed. They're really more appointed. Like it's a Rolodex, the executive team goes, hey, we have a CMO role. Who do you know? If maybe they used an executive search firm. But even with the executive search firms, there's no guarantee of parity among candidates. They go out, they have relationships with candidates that they've built over the years, and it's like they may be just moving the same cards from one deck to another. And if it's not being, these roles are not being filled by nepotism or friends or whoever it is, referrals, they're usually just appointed roles. And so I think the process needs to kind of change. If you really want to have equity at that level, then just focus on the skills, qualifications, or find, people who have the potential to do the job and give someone, take a risk. We could talk about sports. We don't have enough time, but there's plenty of sports teams and analogies where teams have gone out, hello Texas, and hired a coach with very little experience. And then next thing you know, they're in the playoffs, right? And I'm not even a Texas, football fan, but I'm just giving that as an example, right? So it can be done. I just think we need people to kind of broaden their minds and their exposure.
What strategies can organizations implement to attract and retain diverse talent, particularly in industries or regions with historically low diversity representation?
These are not softball questions, and thank you.
I only got a couple more minutes with you. I gotta throw those fastballs in.
So make best efforts, because at the end of the day, it comes down to availability and how attractive you can make your organization. Yes, you may have to bring someone into, the state, the county, the county, wherever your organization is located, if remote or hybrid or whatever the case may be, is not an option for your organization. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have to be able to tell the story. And again, you can't just look at your organization. Perhaps there's, an opportunity like, hey, do you know your community? Meaning your customers, the people that you serve, the people who are your potential employees. Just try and foster, like we always say, foster a sense of inclusion, even when the last thing that I ever want to feel like is like a token. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use the real words. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. No, I don't want to feel like a token, and I don't want to feel like an only who can't change that. Like once you hire me, I don't want you to feel like you're done. Once you hire me, I want you to make sure that not only me, but that others have a sense that they want to stay.
Yeah. I would just say real quick, because we're on time, piggyback on what Keirsten said, it's like just create a safe space, right? And people will take a chance and say, you know what, I'll be a trailblazer, I'll be the first. And then you can invite others to the party.
As we wrap up, I'll give you one last question each. And the question is, if you could give one piece of advice to the audience that you want them to walk away from this presentation and this webinar to think about, to challenge themselves around this topic, what is that going to be?
I'll start. I'll say, find the thing that you're most uncomfortable with when it comes to this topic or subject, and take that as a goal. Whether it's like, hey, you know what? I want to learn more about this particular community. Could be Black, African American, Indigenous, whatever it is. And listen to a podcast, read a book, do something that you normally would not do, and take that step and stick with it for like 90 days or so. And I guarantee you, it will transform you. You'll learn some things about this other demographic group or population, because I think the biggest thing that people don't realize, or folks that are in the underserved community, we've had to systematically. That's why we know so much about your culture, right? Because we've learned educational wise. So now flip it on its head and you do the same, and then you'll see over time how you begin to cultivate the knowledge that you need to really be able to embrace and engage others. And I don't want to hear this thing about like, I don't know what to say. And I'll leave it at that. But take that challenge on.
I want to piggyback on that in terms of doing the knowledge. I do want to encourage that, but I also want to caution to not expect or to unintentionally have other people do your work for you. Meaning, don't come to me and ask me what you need to know. Pick up the book or listen to the podcast or read whatever, and then we can discuss it. And I might give you some tips, or not even tips. I might give you some, oh, well, you know what? I read that too. And also this. And we can have those conversations, but it shouldn't be I like for it to be a conversation myself personally. I don't want to feel like I'm teaching you something, because I am not a teacher. And again, I don't do free labor. Sorry, guys. So don't come to me and be like, so tell me about your experience as a Black woman at work. No. enjoy. But if we happen to work together and you ask me a question about something work related, that's a different conversation. Like I said, just try not to have me do any free labor and we're good. Natives and sorry.
How can we follow you? How can people get connected with you guys? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm at Trap Recruiter everywhere. If you can't spell Keirsten, Keirsten Greggs.
Okay.
And for me, I'll just put my handles in the chat there. If you want to reach out to me through my website, through LinkedIn, I have a newsletter. Feel free to connect. I write some pretty interesting stuff. Try to make it entertaining as well from time to time, and educational. So love to talk to folks. Message me if you have questions. Not for free. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, if you have any reasonable questions.
See, now y'all took it too far. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Still, reach out. We'd love to connect. And we'd love to do this again, too. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I think it was Cecile that mentioned she wants to see some more of these. And then what about the questions that we didn't get to answer in the chat and the Q&A? Or are we going to revisit those or no?
Yeah, we can. If you have time, we can definitely hit on a couple of those if you guys have time.
I do, but I want to be respectful of the audience's time.
For sure. Maybe we'll do one more. It looks like Clifton had a question. Let me scroll up. Let's see. I believe his question, here we go. Any advice on building relationships with leadership when working on DE&I initiatives? especially when you're early on in your career and your level of seniority hinders direct connection with leadership?
That's a great question, Clifton. Build your I always tell folks to build relationships closest to get to the next level. And I hear what you're saying, that not having a connection to your leadership team, or not having a direct like next person connected to your leadership team, but that's why a lot of organizations do what they call skip levels, where you get to know those people. And if they don't have formal skip levels, request one. No one is going to, I promise you, no one's going to tell you no, that they don't have time. If you know who that person's administrative assistant is, say hi. Does this person do this? Some organizations, their leadership does office hours. Go to them. Go to them. And not only will you have a courtside seat to the leader, but you're going to have courtside seat to other folks in your organization, and be able to network and build your community, and feel more comfortable approaching those conversations.
Just to add, you might get promoted. Like literally, you can come up with a great idea. I got plenty of examples of where I just threw stuff out there. Next thing you know, they were like, "Hey, great, write that up on a 6-pager, and now you lead it." Like, oh, okay. I guess I could do that. I was just taking a stab at this and throwing it out there, but take that risk. And then next thing you know, you now put yourself in a position where you fostered an idea that can be scalable across the company, and actually you just built experience on your resume. So not a bad thing, not a bad thing. And any ideas that produce revenue, trust me, they'll be very thankful. Nobody will turn that down. So definitely take that risk.
Well, as we wrap up, I think this was an insightful conversation. And the cool thing about it, it was real, it was honest, and we're really trying to make those connections. So with bottom of my heart, thank you so much, Keirsten. Thank you so much, Kevin, for really sharing your expertise and getting vulnerable. I always talked about the best growth someone can have is when they get the most vulnerable. And I learned a ton from you guys today. I would encourage you to have these conversations, not just stop here, but continue in your career and moving forward. And one way to do that is get connected in the Hire Easy community page. I put that PDF of all the things that are happening within this month at Hire Easy. On May 28th, we have another FRBR conference, and some of those conference speakers, their 20-minute session is going to be specifically on diversity. One is even for the older population trying to get back into the job market. So 55 plus and older individuals interviewing for roles right now, sometimes they're getting passed up. I think it's going to be a really, really cool opportunity to dive in deep a little more specifically on a diversity and inclusion topic that goes beyond, the things that we talked about today. So please get involved, join the Outbound Recruiting Academy. And if you have any other things that you guys want to talk about, please connect with me on LinkedIn, message me. I'd love to get you guys involved, as well as talk about topics that is actually happening right now on the ground floor. I'd love to understand what you guys want to talk about and how we can change this community and industry together. So I just want to say thank you again, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time. Keirsten, thank you so much. And I'm excited for you guys to get connected with all these listeners and expand your scope and impact of the community. So thanks again.